A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking your time today to join the Cyber Warriors Conclave. Today, we're connecting with the C-suite and senior executives responsible for protecting their organization's critical infrastructure, along with innovative solution providers and other renowned information security experts from the region. We will learn from them how to protect and defend our schools, colleges, and universities from cyber attacks during interactive panels and fast-track discussions. A big thank you to our sponsors and partners, Mimecast and Amity. The conclave will kick off with a keynote speech on the exponential growth of cybersecurity in the digitally connected world by Vivek Gupta, the Global and Group Chief Information Security Officer from GEMS Education. This will be followed by a presentation on how to protect your students, staff, and intellectual property against the evolving cyber threat landscape by Shaun, who's a cybersecurity consultant from Mimecast. Then we will move on to a panel discussion on the importance of cybersecurity in the education sector, with speakers from GEMS Education, KAUST, Canadian University Dubai, New York University Abu Dhabi, and Amity University Dubai. And finally, this will be followed by another panel discussion on cybersecurity challenges in the education sector, with speakers again from GEMS Education, American International School Dubai, Al Falah University, Doha College, and Greenwood International School. I'd now like to call upon Vivek Gupta. The screen is all yours, Vivek.
Thank you. Thank you, Karthik. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Vivek Gupta, as Karthik mentioned. I am part of GEMS Education. GEMS Education is the world's largest K-12 private education company. We have footprint in UAE, in Saudi, in Egypt, Qatar, US, big presence in Europe, including UK, Switzerland, France, and in East Asia, Singapore, Malaysia, and India. Just to give a 1-minute introduction about myself, I come from more than 20 years of security background. I am ex-IIT Kanpur. Today, if you are aware that whether it is Microsoft CEO or Google CEO, they all come from IIT. And I am from the same institute. I come from IIT background in computer science. Apart from that, I have also been working with Deloitte. I've been working with IBM. I set up the security practice for IBM way back in 2004. And I was part of the risk practice of Deloitte in 2003. And being a CISO for the world's largest financial mutual fund company, which is Fidelity International, Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan are below that. I mean, I come from Fidelity. I was the CISO of Fidelity way back in 2006. And I've been in the CISO journey for multiple years. And before joining GEMS, I was with Landmark. So as you know, Landmark, once again, is one of the largest retail players in the region. And I was the CISO for that organization. I was the first CISO for Landmark Group. With that introduction, let me share with you the exponential growth of cybersecurity in the digitally connected world. I would like to extract a quote and mention about the WEF, that is the World Economic Forum report, one of the most respectable report on dangers in the world. And that's where all the chieftains of the industry and political people get together and discuss how to fire extinguish the dangers of the world. The dangers which they bring out in the report are in 5 buckets, which covers economic, environment, society, geopolitical, and technology. It is no-brainer to say that out of these 5 buckets and the multiple dangers which they bring out, the 2 which call out the top 2 is the climate change and infectious diseases. We all know that COVID has impacted and changed the attention of world leaders and the normal citizens, that how our lives are at the hand of these infectious diseases. So that has become one of the top dangers, and the climate change. You will be surprised that cybersecurity failure figures in the top 5. Yes, last 10 years, if you pick up the World Economic Forum report, you will realize that cybersecurity failure has been figuring in all those reports, either top 5 or top 10, but it has always figured. And that in multiple technology areas where disaster recovery and others are also there, in technology, the top is again cybersecurity. So cybersecurity continues to draw the eyeball attention of all the world leaders, whether they're economic leaders or the political leaders. It continues to do that. One more statistics I would like to bring on the table, that most of the countries in the Gulf region have a footfall of 99% internet users of the population. This is again in that report. I'm quoting from the report. I'm not giving from some other unauthenticated or unsolicited figures. I'm sharing the source. If you pick up, do a Google search, get into the World Economic Forum report, you will see these data points which I'm talking about. So given this context, given this background, that if cybersecurity, which all the chieftains think is amongst the top 5, and the internet user has percolated to 90% plus population, at least in the Middle East, one can understand how critical cybersecurity is. Now, from that context, if we talk about the businesses, all businesses are today driving at the digital highway. The digital highway has become an important pillar for the business leaders to attain their goals. From that context, if we see, the digital journey was going on and it had a linear progression. But the last 1.5 years post-COVID, the same journey has gone into a high-speed gear and exponential growth. And that's why I said about the topic as exponential growth in cybersecurity, because business has gone digital in an exponential manner. With that business growth of moving in exponential manner, we see that most of the critical assets and the crown jewels of the organization have become digital. They were in physical form, they were in different nature present in the organization, but most of them have now, they have put processes, they've gone into RPAs, they have gone into artificial intelligence, they've gone into every nook and corner in the digital world to see how that can seep into their business DNA and take them in more digital and more tech savvy. Now, if the business has transformed so much into digital, where does cyber world come in? We have seen that last 1.5 years, the growth of cybersecurity attack, whether it was ransomware attack, phishing attack, hardly any organization has escaped it. I mean, some figures say 70%, some say 80%. Nobody is saying that it is in teens. Nobody is saying less than 50%. Everybody is saying that the cyber attacks and the cyber risk has gone to that proportion. So perimeters have diminished. There is no perimeter left. The endpoint protection has become very, very critical. And so if businesses have gone digital and the risk has gone so high from that perspective, we see that today the management of the organization, the senior management have started asking the IT heads or the CISOs that what is our cybersecurity posture. They have started talking about it. It has become a boardroom discussion point. Percentage of how much it is being discussed varies from organization to organization, depending on their cyber maturity, but it has become talk of the organizations. And we see it is slowly percolating down to the customers. Our customers have started asking that, do you have cybersecurity in place? Do you have digital protection in place? Do you protect our students, parents' data? Do you protect our personal information, health information, financial information, whatever information you are collecting? Are you protecting that? So whether it is the management, whether it is our customers, all have started talking in that language. As far as the employees go, today the job for CISO and the IT head to tell the employees to attend the cybersecurity training has become relatively easy, because all of them have either directly or indirectly been a victim of some or the other form of attack. And so they have started listening to this training. They have started participating in this awareness campaign. And all of them are aware that cybersecurity is the need of the hour. As health protection has become a need of the hour for most of the citizens of the world, same way cybersecurity awareness has again become a common taxonomy amongst the citizens, given the fact that they have become victim or they have seen somebody in the close quarter who has become victim of cyber attack. With that, I would like to share that all of us have now come to a stage where we have to keep ourselves running at the speed of sprint, and a marathon where the journey will continue and it's not going to stop. It is going to be a part and parcel of our life. Like COVID and other infectious diseases we have seen in the past, and they will remain in the future also in some form and fashion. Cyber attacks and cyber threat is going to be part and parcel of our life, which I have seen for last 20 plus years, and I can see that it's not going to go away. It's only going to be demanding more and more with time. With that, I would like to conclude my keynote speak with saying, it is our job, it's a journey, and we have to keep moving in the correct direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivek, for that insightful keynote address. Next up, we have how to protect your students, staff, and intellectual property against the evolving threat landscape by Mimecast. I'd like to invite Shaun Levy.
Thank you, Karthik.
From Mimecast. Over to you, Shaun.
Thank you. Okay, just checking, are you able to see my screen share?
Yes, your screen is clear.
Perfect. Okay, so now, do you ever wonder, why the education sector is such a major target for cyber attacks? Every year, the education sector seems to remain the top of just about every analyst briefing, just about every industry report, almost every infographic about security, about threats, and about attacks. So on the slide, I want to have a look at some statistics, and this was pre-pandemic, right? Now, pre-pandemic, education had the 4th highest number of notifiable data breaches in 2019. Attacks on the education sector increased significantly from 9 to 18% of all attacks in 2019. Education is also noted as one of the top sectors for ransomware attacks. And almost 1/3 of the breaches in the education sector involved phishing, while 29% of the breaches involved the use of stolen credentials. So why is it that the education sector is such a big target? Now, with most of these attacks being motivated by financial gain, now I'll give you 3 reasons why this sector is always a go-to target for bad actors. Now, the first is PII, or identifiable information. Now, educational institutes' databases are rich with PII. This includes things like names, addresses, identifications, numbers, parents' details, and so on. Now, all of this information can be monetized in one way or another. The other reason is unpreparedness. Now, when you compare this to other industries, Unfortunately, education ranks last for cybersecurity preparedness globally. Now, there's many reasons. A lot of them span from things like insufficient email security, but you could have things like vulnerable CCTV systems, weak endpoints, and so on. And the hacker's perception is that these sectors are typically a very easy hit. And the third reason is IP espionage. Now, sometimes, research at big higher education institutes, research findings and knowing about projects that are going on can be very valuable. We see a lot of espionage-driven attacks becoming more and more common these days. Now, in the first slide, we looked at some stats pre-pandemic. I want to fast forward, and according to research from the last year, in contrast, the threat landscape is more active than ever. Now, according to these stats, a quarter of all colleges experience breaches or attacks at least once a week. Now, that's significant. 63% or 2/3 of global malware encountered reported to Microsoft in June 2021 occurred in the education sector. 884 million records that were leaked globally in 2020 were stolen from education sector. Half of the universities reported a data breach in the past year. 92% of schools would welcome increased cybersecurity awareness training for staff. And 36% of higher education institutes do actually not know the full cost of the previous cyber attacks. Indirect, direct costs, it's hard to calculate, and it takes a long time to see the full effect. So next, I want us to take a look at some of the biggest challenges in the education sector. Now, the next few slides are some of the top results on what our customers are telling us based on research. Now, the first challenge is limited resources. Now, one of the biggest challenges with education will always be the lack of resources. This is funding, time, and manpower, which is all often stretched out in any sort of school environment. Now, many schools also just don't have in-house expertise to identify and secure against malicious threats. Now, as a result, the proportion of primary and secondary schools identifying breaches or attacks fell this year. Now, this may look good, right? However, I want you to focus on the key word here, which is identifying. Now, it's typically the attacks that are not identified, which are the ones that make it past our defenses, right? Now, it's likely because these attacks are sophisticated attacks, spear phishing and phishing attacks designed to bypass layers of security. Now, the second reason is obviously tighter budgets, thanks to COVID-19. The second challenge is stricter regulations. Now, education institutes are understandably subject to rigorous rules and regulations around protection of data and IP. And under the General Data Protection Regulation Guidelines, or GDPR, UK schools need to report breaches to the ICO within 72 hours of discovery. Now, these institutes need to align enough to react in 4 ways. The first is to uncover and isolate breaches before they impact the organization. The second is to securely store personal data, research data, PII, etc. The third is having the capability to fully restore data in the event of some sort of deletion. Could be human error, could be a successful attack, accidental, whatever. And then the fourth is having the ability to protect sensitive information and simplify compliance with things like PCI DSS and GDPR. The third challenge is then open learning. So now, prior to COVID-19, open learning, or the ability to learn from anywhere, was really only encouraged in higher education establishments. Now, with schools moving to a more blended style learning, this practice has now been accepted nationwide. But there are obviously inherent challenges that come with this, such as overcoming device inequality among students, or specifically the security threats that come from opening up the networks to allow for these high number of devices and the variety of devices. And of course, wherever there are barriers that are put up, there will always be users that look to circumvent them. Now, what we found was that 42% of schools globally have students or staff that have circumvented the cybersecurity protections that that institutes have put in place. And this is why user awareness or awareness training is so important, because we need to educate our users to become an increasingly more aware in terms of what the risk would be with circumventing this type of security. And the fourth and last challenge would be the reputation protection. So now education establishments are built on trust. Parents put their trust in schools to take care of their children, and higher education students put their trust in the institutes to give them a strong foundation for their future careers. Now, trust relies on establishment integrity and good reputation, which can quickly be destroyed with just one incident. But also, businesses invest very heavily in cutting-edge research that higher education students can provide. So the commercial value of this research is also incredibly high, and therefore it's highly sought after by malicious actors. Now, bad actors use a vast array of methods using trusted brands, such as brand exploits. These are attacks that use similar domains to yours, or could clone a website of yours, drawing customers or just the general public to it. Spoofing, which is the replication of your exact domains, and then impersonation, which is the use of lookalike domains, but however they are very cleverly disguised to attack your users internally. So in the next few slides, I want to look at some of the most common attacks that the education sectors are facing. And firstly, I want to highlight that email continues to be the #1 attack vector. Now, 94% of all attacks start with email, with 23% of these attacks using web to deploy malware. Email is a very easy tool for bad actors to use and manipulate to create phishing attacks, to create spear phishing attacks, impersonation attacks, and so on. It's very easy for them to be able to embed a malicious link or malware onto an email. It's very cheap to put together. It's very quick to deliver, right? And everybody has access to email. And people without the right awareness training continue to be the weakest link in these types of attacks. Now, according to the Verizon Data Breach Report, ransomware attacks have doubled since 2017. Now, the education sector is on top, as I mentioned earlier. It's a top sector for ransomware attacks. And these ransomware attacks can cripple the school's network and are often spread through things like phishing attacks via email. Now, sometimes these attacks do go undiscovered for a long period of time. And according to this Verizon report, about 60%, so 2 out of 3 of these breaches took months or longer to discover, even though most of the breaches examined had data compromised within minutes of that attack taking place. Now, last year, just a quick use case here. Last year, the education sector witnessed one of the largest increases in data breaches. This was up by 103% over the previous half year, with an increase of over more than 4,000% in the number of records lost, stolen, or compromised. Now, while users are typically the target for bad actors, a weak human firewall is a recipe for disaster, right? A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Now, privacy risk management needs to also be a part of the school's culture, and all staff should be aware of the risk associated with data breaches or malicious cyber attacks occurring at the schools. Schools can think of privacy risk management as a 4-step process. The first is embedding a culture of privacy that enables compliance. The second would be establishing a robust and effective privacy process. The third, evaluating a school's privacy process to ensure continued effectiveness. And 4, to enhance a school's responses to privacy issues. Okay. All right, how are we doing for time? Okay, let me continue. Right, now, recently, the Mimecast Threat Center has been following a sophisticated attack campaign known as a money mule scam. Now, this is specifically targeting colleges and universities. Now, a money mule recruitment scams are nothing new for cyber criminals. They often use them for social engineering or for credential theft, but this new flavor of attack specifically targets students in higher education. Now, students falling for this money mule scam not only reveal personal information that could be used for immoral purposes, but they also put the college or the university they attend to at risk. Now, basically, what a money mule is, it's a person who knowingly or unknowingly transfers stolen money on behalf of others. Now, this is usually through their bank account. The perpetrator of the attack generally offers a salary to the money mule to receive money to their bank account and transfer it to another account. What ultimately this does is that it obscures the origin of the money and also the liability for the funds when the bank realizes that the check is bad and that the money is in fact stolen. Now, the Mimecast Threat Center has been tracking a Nigeria-based cyber criminal group posing as a consulting company. Now, the group has been targeting colleges and university students and specifically with work from home job offers that ask them to cash checks for commission, right? Now, this is a two-part operation. The first is that the scammer compromises the student's email account through a phishing attack. Then they send the job offer to the compromised student's address book. Now, the job offer email contains a short URL which redirects to a Google form. And as part of the application process, the recipient needs to fill in quite a large amount of data. Things like names, email addresses, non-academic email addresses, and so on. Now, normally, this gives scammers, by providing them with non-academic email addresses, this also gives scammers the ability to pivot off that attack and target their target outside of the college or the university. Now, once the victim fills in the form, revealing their personal information, this Nigerian-based scammer sends a follow-up email providing details of the tasks that come with the job. Right? But the first responsibility always involves cashing checks. Now, the email goes on to ask for confirmation of full name, your occupation, physical address, receiving mail addresses, and mobile number to receive texts. These emails also have short URLs that redirect to Google Forms in the same style as the application form. Now, in many large organizations today, this type of scam would raise flags, right? It would be very detectable. Most people would be able to identify this. Most systems would be able to identify this, right? Unfortunately, students are a target-rich population for these schemes because students are vulnerable. Now, many of them might be struggling to pay for their education. So they're looking for a quick and easy way to make some money. Another reason that students make promising targets is that a lot of academic institutes often do not put the same level of importance on security for student email accounts as they do for protecting faculty accounts. And cyber criminals know this, you know. But typically, security concerns are often a lower priority spend. Some decision makers tend to view IT investments as a high cost item with no significant return on investment. Now, students falling for this money mule scam not only reveal personal information that could be used for nefarious purposes, but they also put the institute they attend at risk. Now, the information gathered in a money mule scam could be stored away, could be used later in some other sophisticated attack to compromise the college or the university. In fact, while it's not specifically the case in this scheme, our past threat center research shows that universities, that the proprietary research data from universities, especially focused on new technology and defenses, is extremely valuable to nation state hackers. You know, these groups that are looking to steal and leverage this IP. Now, to mitigate this risk, to mitigate the risk with the students falling for money mule scams and other damaging attacks, colleges and universities need to consider the following. The first is to offer engaging security awareness training at regular intervals. Now, students can be taught to detect red flags in scam emails and avoid them. As I mentioned earlier, you know, your chain is only as strong as your weakest link. So building up the human firewall is definitely a top consideration. The second is to consider using an email security solution that includes sophisticated algorithms that can detect impersonations, can detect malicious emails and other anomalies. They must also put the same level of emphasis on securing students' email accounts as they do on protecting faculty accounts. And thirdly, while budgets in higher education institutes are unlikely to double overnight, we should also be ensuring that the basic security fundamentals are followed, such as patching or authentication protocols, etc., are in place. Okay, just want to check how I'm doing for time here. Okay, got a couple more minutes, so I'll just move through the next couple of slides very quickly. So the following 3 slides just talk about some of the trends that have occurred as a result of the pandemic. And I'm sure we can all agree that a lot has changed. And with these changes brings a lot of positive outcomes, but also brings a lot of risk, with some new additional risk as well. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic led to education institutes having to pivot how they deliver teaching to students. For younger children, parents typically become teachers, and they're responsible for homeschooling. For older students, they had to take more responsibility for their own learning than ever before. The impact is likely to be long-term, with many institutes taking on a hybrid or blended or e-learning approach to future-proof their teaching methods. For hybrid learning to continue to be successful, it's important that students and staff can securely access the devices and services that enable them to learn remotely. Now, the opportunity to improve your security posture would be to improve faculty, parent, and student security awareness via awareness training. The second trend is EdTech, or educational technology, which includes all the various technologies used in educational establishments to develop their digital learning methods. Now, even before COVID-19, the EdTech sector was growing, right? But with recent stats show that many institutes don't embrace the services fully. However, they are looking to change. Now, the increased presence and the wider variety of these technologies available in these learning environments means that there are services for IT teams to protect and secure, and more endpoints open to possible attacks. Now, these resources are already stretched, and this obviously presents a major opportunity for learning progress, but also a major headache for IT teams, right? So something maybe add in a robust web security, as many complementary technologies are web-based, could be something for consideration. And finally, the accessible learning trend. So again, during the pandemic, students that needed specialist support and equipment lost access to them, right? So these are maybe special needs. Now, making sure that all these users continue to have a secure, consistent, and accessible learning experience available to them is obviously essential for IT teams. But as hybrid learning looks set to continue, this will continue to be a core priority. So while educational establishments have always made efforts to make learning accessible to all, increased technology in education has presented opportunities to obviously do better. While unfortunately, this also does open up to new avenues of exploitation, right? So protecting all users against spear phishing, impersonations, ransomware, and other advanced email threats before they are exposed to them. So having something at the perimeter, we're stopping all the bad stuff from, all the bad things from making their way to the schools. And also using behavioral analytics to help IT teams quickly identify potential high-risk users. And those that are profiting from standard awareness training and with insight to adapt training to suit obviously individual needs. So having something that's more agile and more granular as well. And on that note, that brings us to the end of this presentation. I thank you everybody for your time. Feel free to ask any questions, to reach out. I'll be available. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shaun, for that eye-opening presentation on the various ways of how actors, or not bad state actors, are targeting educational institutions. If we've got any questions, we can take them now. Okay, Shaun, I don't think we've got any questions coming in. If we do have any questions that are directed towards you, we'll pass them on. Thank you. Next, we have a panel discussion on the importance of cybersecurity in the education sector. This is moderated by Vivek Gupta, who's the Global and Group Chief Information Security Officer at GEMS Education. Vivek?
Thank you. Thank you for that, Karthik. I would like to invite Ed, Lokman, Aftab, and Nitin in this panel. Please join me for this intriguing session, which we are going to have on importance of cybersecurity in the education sector. You all are leaders in your own organizations in information technology and information security aspects. So your views will be important for the audience to understand what you are seeing the ground picture and what are the takeaways for them. I would like to invite Ed to introduce himself and kick off this panel discussion by sharing his views on importance of cybersecurity and the need, and what does he think if one point he has to call out on the importance of cybersecurity in the education sector. Ed, over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me clearly?
You are loud and clear.
Okay, great. My name is Ed Sleeman. I come with 35 years experience in the IT industry, last 15 out of which in security, started in biometric security and moved to cybersecurity. I'm currently the Chief Information Security Officer at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, which is located north of Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. We're an international university, the first mixed gender university in the country. We're only graduate only research collaborative university. Have 103 nationalities on campus. I think at some point we were 112. The whole campus is a city comprised of it's about 30 million square meters, 5 by 6 kilometers, by which more than 7,000 to 8,000 people live here. The institution or the housing community, as well as the recreation centers, all the other admin buildings other than the university campus are also supported by IT. So basically you can think of it as a city with an ISP, as well as basically an IT infrastructure for a university. So it's a hybrid system that we have to protect at the Information Security Department here. And it is quite a challenging task to do, because your risk profile is not just one risk profile. You're actually running a city as well as a university. So in terms of your question regarding the importance of cybersecurity, or at least I think that the question said something like to share one item, if I may look at it, yeah. One item in the one major driver behind the need for cybersecurity in the education sector, and why do you think so? My take on that, I mean, the way I understood the question is that, do we need cybersecurity? So I want clarification here. Does your question mean, do we need cybersecurity in the education industry to protect our assets, or is it, do we need cybersecurity education at universities because, you know, cybersecurity is a hot field and it's growing? Can you be more specific about the question?
Yes, Ed, what I was trying to bring on the table was from your experience driving cybersecurity in your organization. what do you think which comes to the top of your mind is the one major key driver that because of this reason, cybersecurity is like a do or die for the organization? What is it, that one thing which crops? There are 3, 4, 5. We heard Mimecast say there are 3, 4, 5 reasons. But in your experience of so many years in this area, in your organization, what is that one key driver for the education sector which calls out?
Okay, so the education sector is quite different from a lot of sectors, but we still do get targeted. So education has been one of the main targets for hackers these days. If you take the pandemic, for example, education institutions that were doing research in the COVID-19 vaccine arena were a target, because a lot of companies and probably, if we may call it industrial espionage or pharmaceutical espionage, was happening because people wanted to know what universities are doing in terms of research, because they want to get the vaccine first out to the public, so that, because that's a lot, there's a lot of money involved there. But from that perspective, if we were to take away the pandemic effect, which has affected all of us, as a university, we have a different, quite a different risk profile from a lot of other institutions. So being in Saudi Arabia, we cannot, for example, compare ourselves to Aramco. We cannot compare ourselves to a bank, or a critical infrastructure company, or a military organization or anything, or even a government institution for that matter. What we have to look at is we have to implement security based on risk. We cannot just basically take a set of controls that are recommended by either a best practice or a regulatory authority and say, okay, flop these 114 or 135 or whatever controls that we have, and say, okay, we're going to apply all these controls to mitigate our risks within the university, cyber risks that we're talking about. What you have to do is take a risk-based approach and constantly educate your senior management about the importance of a risk appetite, and providing you from the top down with a risk appetite that tells you and informs you how to do your business as a CISO. So basically, a CISO cannot go on his own or her own without some guidance from the top top management, senior management, on what is important, what's not important. So if we take our university, for example, since I said we're a graduate-only research collaborative university, you can tell probably research is one of the most important assets that we have, and we need to protect that research. So you have to go through an exercise of identifying your crown jewels first, be it a university or not a university, but in a university specifically, crown jewels could be your research if you're a research-oriented university. It could be student records or student PII data if you're not a research university. If you're handling also, in our case, we have, for example, a on-campus clinic or a hospital, mini hospital. So we handle also protected health information, PHI data, in addition to PII data. So once you've collectively understood what the risk appetite is of the organization, you'll be able to, based on that, also identify the crown jewels of the organization. Then that risk-based approach should allow you to select the proper controls to apply so that you would not impact the business, the day-to-day business of your organization, and everything will go smoothly, thus creating a balance between security and convenience or performance at the same time. So if I were to summarize, one major challenge that you face, or one driver for this, is risk management. You need to be driven by risk management and risk appetite, and not by the shiniest and brightest machines out there that will protect you. I know vendors will come to you and tell you that we have this technology and that technology, et cetera, that will protect you. What you have to do in an educational institution, because you have limited budgets and limited resources, you have to base it on risk, and you cannot just go out and buy the shiniest toys out there.
Thanks. That's very insightful. Where the kind of constraints which the CISOs work in the educational institutions, and You have to identify the risks, see what are the crown jewels. What I understood from your update, identify they can be research data in your case, the PII data, PHI data, identify that data so that the data protection and the risk mitigation strategy can be put in place. Thanks for that. Now I would like to invite Aftab. Aftab, what do you think is your view if I have to say that one thing, like we saw Ed sharing his experience, what in your view is that one thing which crops in your mind that this is one key driver for a CISO in the organization? You are new, thank you. I thought you were speaking.
Good afternoon, everyone. That's a very interesting question to talk about. And I fully agree with Ayad when he said there are multiple factors, but each organization would have its own viewpoint of what they see as a significant reason to determine what their roadmap should be. There are quite few challenges, there are quite few factors on it. And to understand what the significance of this has been, we need to go back few months back into history prior to COVID. And I believe most of the panelists would be talking about their situation before the COVID and after the pandemic times. Education sector had its own set of challenges. They had their scarcity of funds, lack of resources, lack of staff, limitation to the skill set challenges, and all this. The significance of cybersecurity for an education sector did already exist prior to pandemic times as well. But pandemic has highlighted and underlined the importance of it to the IT heads. That's one thing that has brought. COVID-19 brought a massive change and shift from the conventional on-campus training to a hybrid learning. Now, this overnight shift has left the education system more overexposed to the surface attack of what it is capable of being harmed at. The attackers have become sophisticated. Their way of functioning has become very challenging. And they understand that the education system is the one that has been paid less of attention when it comes to cybersecurity. Banks have been the first and the foremost one that have been protected. Education system lies at the back end. That's one reason. But if you look at the significance of what is at risk to an education system or an education sector is not just the financial risk, it's the intellectual property that is to be safeguarded. Financial systems gain or the repercussions of a financial compromise can be covered over a period of time. But intellectual property, the repercussions would be visible much more beyond the times the attack was done. That's one. So if you look at financial gains or the risk, the status, all this is at one end. The intellectual property that needs to be protected because the academic records is one thing that is being held at an academic institution. And as Mimecast, Shaun was saying that the reputation is at stake because most of the institutions are driven by the name. Like, for example, I come from Canadian University, Dubai. We take pride to say that we are in the top 2% of the universities in the world. So each organization takes its pride to say where they stand as a reputation, because that has come over a period of long hard work, dedication of the executive management, the people behind it to bring that organization to that level. And I'm sure every one of us over here on the panel would agree to that. Their teams have put a volume of an effort to bring the organization to that level. Now that status is at risk. The intellectual property of the academic is at risk. That is one factor that I would say more than the financials that needs to be protected. And one driving force, one driving factor for an educational institution is the protection of intellectual property. That is why this needs to be protected.
Thanks. Thanks for that, Aftab. I see your input also resonating with what Ed said, that data protection, and one of the key crown jewels from that is the academic records, the IP which is generated by the academic institutions. That IP protection, which has far-reaching repercussion in the years to come, that needs to be protected because it is their organization IP and it should not go into wrong hands.
True. If I were to add one more thing, Vivek, see, other sectors do have resilience in a form of an insurance protection. Financial institutions, they have insurance protection intellectual properties, academics, risk, they cannot be protected by an insurance in a real sense. That's one reason why I would say it that way.
That's an interesting insight, because how can insurance mitigate that? That the kind of damage that IP loss will create. The financial thing, you can have a number to it in terms of getting cyber insurance, but the IP it can be hundreds, it can be thousands, millions or billions. It can be to anything, and there are so many research work going on. It's not just one research work. So point taken. Let me invite Lukman. Lukman, why don't you introduce yourself and share, if you have to think that one thing which comes across your mind as a key driver, which gives you sleepless nights, that this is something which is, from the cybersecurity, I have to do or die to ensure my organization is protected. What is it that crosses you?
Well, thank you. First of all, Vivek, regarding sleepless nights, that's, I think, comes with the job, and I'm sure all of us in the panel will agree, that's part of being head of security or head of IT in these times in particular, So yes, let me give you a brief introduction. The name's Lukman Kondet. Been with IT for over nearing 20 years now. I am currently the head of cybersecurity at New York University, Abu Dhabi. It's one of the three campuses for New York University, three degree granting campuses. We are a global networked university with another 12 campuses around the world. So that should give you a perspective of the threat landscape we have already. About myself, like I said, nearly 19 years, 20 years, coming up to 21. Had my fair share of war stories, recovering trading floors, bank websites, which one of them, unfortunately, I brought down. Rookie lesson learned in my initial years, service provider outages, and so on. So now the question is, major driver, did you say, for cybersecurity? So I'm going to address this, first of all, let me say, we're going to be in massive agreement here, on what the drivers will be across all panelists. And without repeating what our esteemed panelists have said quite correctly, I'm going to talk about just one level previously, So what should be the driver for any technology or tool? You buy a Tesla car, you buy a screwdriver. What are we trying to do? Are we trying to look at the screwdriver and see its specs, or be amazed by the Tesla car specs? Of course we are. It's got a decent piece of technology, but what purpose does it serve? We got to look at what value does that tool give you. And just as that, just as with those technologies, with IT, we always try to enable and enhance the business. And the same concept is what should drive your cybersecurity or our cybersecurity programs. What is the cybersecurity program here to do? It's exactly like Ayad said. It's not about copying, pasting a set of recommendations from some organization which has made it common for the whole world. It's not about that. It's about understanding what is your requirement. And your requirement as a school, as maybe a higher education institution, maybe a research institution, are quite different. There is no one, what's that word? One stick fits all thing. There is no such concept, So the driver from my perspective is to look at this from an academic mission perspective. What is it that we're trying to do? Cybersecurity is not here to block. We're trying to enable and enhance the business. And when we take that perspective, we quickly realize, what are we trying to protect? Like our panelists said, like Aftab said, it's the intellectual property over here. An interesting story, and I was going talking to a professor once, and he sat me down and said, "Look, man, what do you think is the most valuable thing in the world?" And I'm like, could be gold, oil, And he said, "No, let me tell you this: the molecular structure of the next compound that cures cancer, that could be the billion-dollar intellectual property. Or perhaps it's the next quantum computers or the next Tomahawk fusion reactors. That intellectual property is what we are here to protect and safeguard. So the people who are working on it gets the due credit and can advance the research before it goes away. So if I would summarize all that, what is the driver? The driver for cybersecurity should be the same across all technology. It's to enable and enhance the business, but realizing what is important to our institution. All right.
Thanks. Thanks for that, Lukman. I think that's an interesting perspective you gave. There were some aspects I saw that you were in agreement with what Aftab had mentioned. And in addition, you also mentioned about how do we collaborate with the business to make it more enhanced and see that we can enable them to go in their digital journey. The last panelist who has to speak is Nitin. Nitin, why don't you come on board, introduce yourself and share from your perspective, what is that one thing which keeps you, again, I'll repeat the same words, awake or stressed, all the time from cybersecurity perspective?
Sure. Thanks, Vivek. Myself, I'm Nitin. I'm heading the IT department for Amity Education, Middle East and Europe. To introduce Amity Education, we are in about 15 different countries, operating from different countries, starting from we are operating preschools, K-12 schools to universities. And in the Middle East, actually, we always used to say that actually we always have customers from 40 days to PhD. So we actually are operating preschools. We have students from 40 days till PhD. So that's the category of customers which we actually deal with. And when you say about the awakening call for the cybersecurity, actually, when we think about why should we introduce cybersecurity, I'll think it in a different way. What if cybersecurity is not there? I echo the same thing which all my co-panelists have already said. So basically, the intellectual property, the reputation, and also the common attack vectors which is currently on. The attack vectors has been increased tremendously over the last couple of months, especially during the pandemic situation, as the paradigm shift of everything to the virtual world has increased the attack vector as well. Especially, I require to add to what my co-panelist has already said. So basically, in the current situation, basically the adopting of technology is being done, wherein the adaptation is lacking. So basically what happened is the technology was already there for years and might have been used by the educational industry for a while right now. But certain schools or certain higher education institutes are currently on the adaptation side of it, wherein actually the users are trying to understand how it is being used, how it is being adapted to their day-to-day lessons, or how is that going to be opted in for delivering the lessons, wherein actually that's where the cybersecurity regulations and regulations need to be in place. Basically, as cybersecurity enthusiasts, we all say that actually we are business enablers rather than being a showstopper. We require to enable the business in such a way that actually that shouldn't be haunting the reputation of the industry. Plus, that should be enabling the business in such a way that, for example, if cybersecurity being introduced and if all our systems are safe to be used, why can't we introduce more into the business sector, like, for example, bring your own device, wherein actually your capability to incorporate the cybersecurity part on that is, if you're capable to add that, so that's where where you can allow the third-party systems to be in the same side of it. Actually, everyone on the weaker chain who are currently adapting the technology required to be trained in such a way that everyone should be adopting to the organization vision and mission ahead.
Thanks, Nitin. You gave a lot of perspectives. Thank you for that. You agreed that there are intellectual property that needs to be protected. There's brand reputation which has to be come into place. There are different types of attack vectors which are touching the organizations. Awareness is a big ticket item. So you have given multiple insights as a key driver. Now, if I have to further take this discussion to the next level, Ed, one thing which I want to ask you, how does the regulations play a role in the education sector? What is your experience on that subject?
Great question. I mean, first, before we go into that, let me just explain a couple of things here. When we say regulations, there are a lot of, I was answering a question on the Q&A. When we say regulations, we're talking about regulatory frameworks that exist in every country, and sometimes there are some that are international that apply to us. So the types of frameworks that are out there vary. As we all know that there are control-based frameworks, there are program frameworks, and there are risk frameworks. So if you take control frameworks, basically, you can think of them as the ingredients for your dish that you want to make, okay? And then, but putting together these ingredients and making an actual meal or plate that's edible is quite different. And this is where the program framework comes into play and allows you to put the right, spices and salt and stuff like that and sauces around and present it in a nice way in a plate that becomes edible and actually attractive to the eye. And then you go into risk frameworks. If you're running a restaurant and you're going to actually offer this dish as part of the restaurant, you have to make sure you've done your homework in terms of your market, your customers, who's the target customer list, et cetera, et cetera. If you take this analogy and you apply it to security, we have the control frameworks, which are the ingredients. Then we have the program framework. So control frameworks, if I were to give an example, in our case in Saudi Arabia, NCA ECC is a controls framework. The essential cybersecurity controls, it's called. I don't know, most of you guys are in the UAE, right? So what kind of, I'm not sure what kind of frameworks you have in there. I think you have several UAE frameworks there. I'm not sure if they're controls or program frameworks or risk frameworks. But anyway, so NCA's ECC is a controls framework. If you were to take a university, we were just talking earlier about a profile of a university. A university is not a bank. So you really cannot take a controls framework and say, flop it there and say, I'm going to implement all the 114 controls, because it's going to make your users' lives miserable, of course, because you're going to lock down each and everything that they do, especially in our case as a university that is a graduate only. That means you have graduate students that are much more mature. They know what they want. They're also, it's a research university, so they have a research collaborative university. That means they have to be able to openly collaborate with other collaborators in the world, around the world. If you go and apply something like NCA ECC, you're going to be basically stopping business or making doing business at the university or completing research kind of impossible. So what you want to do is you want to promote this and go to a program framework. A program framework at least allows you to select things based on risk and say, okay, these are my risks. This is what the university can live with in terms of appetite. And based on that, I would select this control, but not this one, but not this one, et cetera, et cetera. And you apply the controls necessary to mitigate the risks beyond the threshold that your senior management accepts. So this is from a regulatory framework point of view. You have also two types. You have also the national and international. What most of us need to do, and actually, I'm sorry, before I go back to that, let me say that program frameworks, give an example like ISO 27001 is a program framework. NIST Cybersecurity framework is another program framework. While CIS, for example, the CIS top 18 controls, they were 20, now they brought them down to 18. It is a controls framework. and NIST 853 is a controls framework, while the NIST 830 and 37 and 39 all have to do with risk management and their risk management framework. So among this alphabet soup of frameworks, the education sector has to really use a risk-based approach to this by answering to applicable regulatory frameworks first. So if I'm mandated by a regulatory framework, like I have an NCA here, ECC, that I have to apply that, then I have to go that way. But I propose that educational institutions should always use a risk-based approach and to this problem. So the challenge is also what to find, to find what applies to you in terms of regulatory frameworks. Of course, the national ones do apply to you, but do any of the international ones apply to you? So do we all know, for example, if GDPR applies to us? Do we all understand the applicability, the scope statement of GDPR? It's so confusing. You can hire law firms over law firms and other law firms to find that out. They'll be more than happy to take your money, but none of you will give you a straight answer saying that GDPR really applies to you or not. For example, I found out after 2 years of research that GDPR applies only if you are doing business in Europe, or if you have European residents working for you, right? But remember, most of us may have European citizens working for us in the Gulf, but they are not European residents at this time. They are Gulf residents. So this does not apply to them. But there's some caveats here and there. So for example, at KAUST, we decided that we're gonna go through this compliance journey with GDPR because the law or the regulation is pretty confusing. And that's what we started doing. I hope that I answered your question about regulatory cybersecurity frameworks that apply to educational institutions.
I will just like to add that from the regulations perspective, one of the passing comment you had made was about awareness on what is happening in the UAE from the educational institutions perspective. So one is, for example, Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi Health Department has come up with the regulations for health data protection from data privacy perspective. So, for example, in our case, we have schools in Abu Dhabi, and these schools have got clinics to take care of the students. And these clinics are maintaining health records of the students, who fall victim to incidents in school, or they are special need students and all. So the health information is there. So we come under the bucket of data privacy of PHI, which you had mentioned earlier. So that particular thing Abu Dhabi government has come out with. Similarly, recently, the UAE government has come up with a federal law from DIFC perspective for data privacy and ensuring that the citizens' data is protected. So there is a law which has also come out from the government. For the Abu Dhabi one, they are doing an audit, they are doing assessment for us, and it is somewhere in line with ISO 27001, which you had mentioned. So they have said that out of all the 114 controls which are there, depending on which bucket you fall in, like the schools, clinics are smaller in nature than their polyclinics and their hospitals. So in the hospital case, or insurance companies where they have health records and all, they come in under the major bucket, then medium and low. So they have done those categorization and they have put the regulations in place.
Yeah, this is similar to the NIST 853, in which they had profiles, and you could be low, medium, and high profile, and you could apply the controls that are specific to that profile. Yeah.
Yes. So they must have adopted that, because when I was talking to the person there, he said that they have used multiple things. They've used something from ISO, something from NIST, and made their own checklist to do those assessments.
Yes, most governments these days do that. They just adopt, instead of reinventing the wheel. Why reinvent the wheel? They basically adopt most of the international or US-based frameworks, and they just modify them a little bit to meet the local flavor.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for that insightful view on the cybersecurity frameworks. Let me call a different aspect now related to attack surface. We saw that Nitin had mentioned on the attack surface, we saw Mimecast talking about how the attack surface is playing havoc in the organizations. So, Lukman, what is your view that with this post-COVID, has the cybersecurity posture of organization changed? Has the attack surface, because we have gone more digital, has the attack surface increased? Have the threats increased? What is your view, Lukman, on that?
Yeah, so definitely, the short answer is yes. Now, fortunately for New York University, Abu Dhabi, our IT systems were always designed to support remote working, working through the cloud. Most of our systems were already well suited for remote working. The shift that happened was, I suppose, our expectation. The expectation was a minority of people would be working outside and the majority would be on campus. That changed so quickly. So within a space of a week or two, we were now completely flipped. Now, because of that expectation, the cybersecurity tools and technologies, practices, everything, that ecosystem we had built was centered around the campus, around the network, around end systems that were communicating to, say, SIEM solutions in the campus, and so on. So what we had to do was quickly, first of all, recognize that now we have a whole different scenario, and the attack surface is now spread all over the world. People were no longer even in the UAE. They were home. Students had to go home. It's a situation we do not know what's happening, and there's a lot of uncertainties and so on. So yes, definitely. So now the attack surface is spread over the world, and we had to then shift to a model which supported these remote end users. So we quickly research tools that can give us. And now I have the good thing about what we do over here is, we keep a security business architecture in place to always align our technology with what the business requires. And when the business required, I shouldn't say business, when the academic mission required that we support a workforce remotely throughout the world, we had to deploy all the processes and technology to support that. And so now I have monthly reports with the new tools and then processes we set in place, which actually tell me, what's going on in remote end stations. And I can tell you, I actually forgot the actual numbers, but a majority of my users were being redirected to, number one, parked domains. Second, malicious users. Like, I forgot the graph itself, but the two big towers were parked domains, malicious website, and then a host of other attacks. So now we're trying to find out, now, hold on, why is this going on here? What are users clicking on? What are they visiting? Which websites are they clicking? And what is this coming through? We have email protection again in the cloud, and so we know the majority of emails should be filtered and so on. So now the research is trying to find out, what is this happening? But like you said, attack surface has, the question was, has it increased? Yes. Have we adapted? Yes. And we are trying to now see what else we can improve to see how to reduce that.
Thanks for that, Lukman. I think that's why I phrased the question that the challenge has grown up post-COVID because the attack surface has gone up. And Aftab, what is your feedback on this topic? That has the attack surface you have also experienced, like Lukman, that has it grown with all this remote connectivity, and what Lukman very nicely brought out, that it is not restricted to only the region, it has become global because the students and the staff, they have gone globally out of the the region. So the attack surface has become global, very well brought out by Lukman. So what is your view, Aftab, from your experience?
Hi, Vivek. See, of course, the views that you would hear from the panelists all over these things would be similar, all right? And the post-COVID, the education sector were forced to move overnight, as we have said. And this has allowed unchecked, unpre-qualified endpoints to get connected to the network. You had see, with COVID-19, what I usually say is everyone is facing the same storm, but it's the different boats that we are sailing into. Some are big budgeted boats and some are restricted boats, but the storm is the same. Everyone is facing the same one. The attack surface is the same. It's a global, it's a wide one, okay? Some of the endpoints, the technology, the software, the application that has come in with this overnight shift, the paradigm shift that has taken place. Maybe if you go back to February 2020, we did not know the volume of the remote users that would get connected to us post-COVID. The moment the education industry goes into a e-learning mode, the number of endpoints that needs to be protected, or the endpoints that were getting connected as remote, has brought in our own set of vulnerabilities with it. The devices were unqualified. Usually what happens when our device needs to get connected to your network, it goes through a pre-qualifying check to see that the device is qualified to get connected to your network. But now over here, the IT leaders faced that the devices were unchecked before they could even get connected. And this was happening at a scale, at a rapid pace, and different sets of devices were getting connected from users who were not truly well aware about IT challenges. So this has widened up the vulnerabilities. The set of vulnerabilities that IT heads were addressing became a wider one. And this has opened up the attack surface to a very large grid. And this has also exposed the number of DDoS attacks, because e-learning was to be blocked by people who had ill intents and all. So they were attacking these things. So I would say in a single line, yes, the attack surface was a longer one, and it became an expanded one.
Thank you. I think we all are resonating with the same response. Nitin, once again, I would like you to also share your experience on this aspect of how do you see in your organization that post-COVID, has the threat gone up because the attack surface has gone up? We saw Lukman, we saw Aftab, they sharing their perspective that they have faced music in that aspect. How about you?
Yes, Vivek, I also echo the same thing which my co-panelist has already said. So basically, yes, the attack vector has already gone up. The surface has already grown up. Basically, just because, you know, when we, during the COVID pandemic time, we already adopted many technology wherein actually for each and every software or whatever application which we are currently using might be sharing the same amount of data which other softwares are also sharing. So the PI of whatever which we share with one application, which may go untested, and then it has been shared by a different application. So where we didn't know which particular application is vulnerable to which one. So we always, I mean, we always engage the most available security tools as well as the cybersecurity practices which we can follow. But as long as we are using multiple applications which shares the same data along with the same requirements and being used across different business sectors, especially from preschools to higher education, and also using the devices which are not qualified, as Aftab said earlier. It gives a lot of you know, the vectors for the hackers, as well as, you know, I mean, to keep a weaker chain, I mean, weaker chain, so that it has definitely has increased a lot. In addition to that, actually, to mitigate all those things, even by making the infrastructure strong, as well as bringing out, you know, all the possible ways of technologies into action. Apart from that, actually, to keep the chain stronger, we always focus on providing awareness and educating the end user on how to get it protected, rather than, you know, just focusing only on the employees, always onto the the students as well as, as I said earlier, the age bands, especially from the primary as well as the K-12 students to the higher education, young adults, it's varied on a wide range. So that's where I always think that actually yes, the activity has increased a lot, wherein actually the mitigation is being always a challenge.
Thank you, Nitin. Thank you for sharing your perspective. As we are now on running out of time, I'll try to summarize what all of you have said. Importance of cybersecurity in education sector, there was all yes from all of you. There is crown jewel in the organization. Everybody I saw resonate with that, whether it was academic research data, the R&D data we saw Ed brought out. We saw that there were data related to intellectual property being talked about, brand reputation. So there is aspect related to that which needs to be protected. This compounded by the fact that COVID has led to the attack surface going up, and education sector was not up to the mark to mitigate that kind of challenge. So it has been a challenge for all the leaders like all of you. This, along with what Ed brought out, that there is a need for frameworks to be adopted because of the regulations which have come into play, which we have to see whether it is risk-based or program-based that fits into the organization. There's, as we say in security, there's no silver gun. It is only silver bullets. So you need a lot of silver bullets to fire to ensure that the risk is mitigated and we are safeguarding our organization. Once again, I would like to thank all the panelists for sharing your insights, your experiences, and helping us become more aware amongst each other. And also to Shaun, which has brought out that from Mimecast perspective, what we can see and take away for this. Thank you all for this panel discussion. I would now invite the second panel, which is going to
Vivek,
talk
sorry
about...
to cut you off. Sorry to cut you off, Vivek, but we have two questions. We are running short of time, but if in case anyone wants to answer those questions, we'll spare a few minutes. I think Ed has already answered the question on chat, but we'll see if anyone else also wants to take that. The first question is, what are the major common mistakes that causes cyber attacks in the K-12 education industry?
So Ed has answered. You said, can you share what he has added so that others can also give an insight from that perspective, and it's not repeated if people have seen it or not.
Okay. So Ed mentioned the user awareness is key here, and everyone have kids who are click happy, who will help to definitely widen the threat surface. So he suggests to check out the human firewall program that he coined and developed to evaluate this problem.
Anybody else wants to share anything on that? I think human firewall is a very good insight which Ed has said. We see in cybersecurity, everybody will agree. Sorry, somebody was saying, and before that, I'll just say one thing, that human awareness and people, as we say in security, there's people, process, and technology. The people pillar is very, very critical and is also the weakest link. One slippage by any employee can sink the ship. It's like, as they say, that one missing nail can sink a ship. Same way from the cybersecurity perspective, one human person doing a mistake can lead to a big time damage. So human firewall is a straight call out. There's no ambiguity on that. Is there anything apart from that anybody would like to contribute?
Yeah, Vivek, and once again in agreement, I'd probably just add maybe a small story of how I did something related to that. So a couple of months back, my kids' school asked, can you talk about cybersecurity? And of course, that's what I love to talk about. What I wanted to highlight was there's two segments here. One, kids who are growing up at the primary stage, and then there's a secondary stage, which is a different target. At the primary stage, I believe we have to communicate this, and perhaps in every stage, in a way that makes sense to them. So what I did during that day was talk about Red Riding Hood. What did Red Riding Hood do wrong? She gave away her details, where she's going to, who she's going to meet, and what's in her basket, right? And now you transpose that to cybersecurity. Don't post your things on Instagram or whatever these kids are using nowadays, Snapchat or whatever. Don't post your stuff on social media. Don't talk to strangers. Don't talk to people you don't know in the woods. So we got to be able to talk about those concepts in language your user community always understands. In this case, this was kids, so let's use Red Riding Hood. So the key message here that I just wanted to pass was, when talking to children, let's leave the complexities aside, but use stories they understand. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. And Karan, I can see the second question was the biggest challenges and opportunities in the BYOD revolution, was the second question that was asked. From the BYOD perspective, I would share there are two aspects. Like Ed mentioned, that that question has an aspect that what do you mean by that? And if I have to think loudly, where the person who is questioned must be coming from, is that today's day and age, as parents, we all are not only cybersecurity professionals, but we are also parents. We have given BYOD to our children, and the BYOD has become one of the tools which has to be given to the children for imparting education. Now, given this background, and given this revolution from the cybersecurity perspective, and also from the child safety and child online safety and safeguarding perspective, what kind of mitigation and risk management do we have in place? And that's where, when I did a dipstick check in the industry, I found a big challenge that if I want a tool which can do web filtering, that the children can't go to these websites. It can do control on downloading of softwares and all, which are online games and others, which I don't want my children or the students to do it. I want to empower the teachers in the classroom to do classroom management, that the student who is sitting there is not watching a YouTube and playing games and all those things, but focusing through that BYOD in the classroom. When the same student comes with the BYOD at home, you as parents know what exactly your child is doing with the BYOD, and just because he has the BYOD in his hands doesn't mean he's learning. He may be, getting carried away. And there are so many other bad actors in the internet. We all know there are so many bad actors who may be influencing things to the children. So that's another dynamics where we have to see as security leaders what we can do. We are working with different industry champions on that subject. So it's a thing which we'll continue to deliberate as we are running out of time. I think it's a hard stop now for all of us for this panel, so that we can take on the second panel. Karan, over to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was a very interesting panel discussion we had. Now we spoke about the importance of cybersecurity. Next up is a panel discussion on the challenges of cybersecurity within the education sector, which is going to be moderated again by Mr. Vivek Gupta. Over to you, Vivek.
Okay, thanks, Karan. Let me invite Sunil, Isaac, Alvina, and Zuena in this panel discussion. Hi, everyone. In this session, we will be talking about the challenges what you all are facing in your organization. We would also want to hear a couple of minutes about your background, so that the audience who are attending it will know where you are coming from, what you're doing, so that they can get the insight of these are the organizations, this is how they are doing and working to mitigate the risk from that perspective. So in this panel, let me start with Zuena. Why don't you share what is the kind of challenge? If I have to say one challenge, there may be a whole hoard of a basket of challenges which you're facing, but if one challenge which comes top of your mind that you are facing in your organization, and give a couple of words about yourself also. Over to you, Zuena.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zuena, and I'm a high school ICT facilitator associated with Greenwood International School. Now, as far as the question is concerned, that definitely there are so many challenges that we have faced given the overnight overhaul of because of the pandemic. But I would say that still based on my observation, the biggest challenge that the education sector is facing as of now is the lack of IT resources. Because the cybersecurity skills gap, it means that there is a shortage of available professionals that are equipped to deal with the threat landscape that, like other people mentioned, that expanded phenomenally overnight. And it actually became impossible for the limited IT resources and personnel that were employed at educational institutes to monitor every device, because if previously the use of device was simply optional, now it has changed. It has become mandatory because we are all connected remotely, whether it's about teaching or whether it's about learning. The reliance on technology is at an all-time high. And as more and more devices require access to the network, carrying the different applications with varying degrees of security, the digital transformation moves infrastructure and resources to the cloud, then the IT teams faced a huge challenge, because they were like, the IT departments were overlooking the cybersecurity were pretty small. And the phenomenal growth, we were just not prepared for it. The growth was unanticipated. So this, I believe, the limited IT resources was the biggest challenge that the education sector had to face.
I think, Zuena, it was music to hear, because we all agree with you. At least I can agree with you that has been one of the big constraints. Alvina, yeah. I would like to invite you now to the panel. Why don't you introduce yourself and share what is that one major challenge, if you have to call out, that keeps you disturbed, keeps you, all the way occupied. If this was done, at least, much of your stress would come down. Alvina, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to hear you all. I believe I was smiling from a long time when my camera was open. Before even I was happy to hear everyone. There are a lot of serious issues and things everyone shared. I must say I'm gonna agree with every single person who is talking. For me, I'm sorry if I forgot to introduce myself, because I was so happy to hear these all things that I forgot. My name is Alvina Abrar. I'm working in American International School as IT and IT management head. So there were so many challenges, I must say, but for me, maybe people will laugh. First problem, the most important thing that we faced, or I feel, that is awareness. Nobody is aware what was cybersecurity. So that was the major challenge. Like when the kids, parents, your own staff is not aware what is this security, what is the importance of keeping your password with you to have it secured, using your device in a proper way, using your ID or entering your ID on a correct portal. This is the basic, but really important, the really biggest challenge that we all faced, the people who are sitting on the background. And even it's like a funny thing, the people who are sitting on your organization, even in the admin, maybe they were not even aware about the importance of data or the security. So for me, in short term, basic things, awareness. Parents, kids, staff, everyone. So when we saw the COVID situation upside down, everybody was jumped into this situation. Devices, companies, everything came up, but nobody was aware that how important your data or your password or uses of these things is.
I think it's quite resonating. Again, if somebody had asked me what are the top ones, I think this goes again no-brainer. Resources is what Svena mentioned was no-brainer. People awareness, as we saw, that human awareness continues to be the weakest link in cybersecurity, and you nailed it. Thank you for that, Alvina. Let me invite Isaac. Isaac, why don't you give your views that what is that one thing which is a major challenge which you face from cybersecurity, apart from what Alvina and Zvena have shared?
Hi, first of all, good afternoon. My name is Isaac Thomas. I am working as a head of IT in Doha College. Doha College is one of the leading international British school, started in 1980 in Doha, in Qatar. We have students from year 3 to year 13, around 2,500 students. We have it here from 68 nationalities. Doha College is one of the first school in Qatar, started iPad program, one-to-one iPad program. We started in 2012, every students from year 3 to year 13 having an iPad. So now we moved to a new campus here in Al-Wajba. When I talk to about the question, I to reply to your questions. The education sector facing many security challenges, like my previous colleagues said, for the limited IT resources, lack of awareness about cyber threats. But my answer for that question is the frequency of cyber attack. I will say for the frequency of cyber attack, the reason, for the last 10 to 15 years ago, we never heard about a ransomware attack. We never heard about the phishing attack, DDoS. But now, almost every day, we are hearing about a kind of attack. It can be a phishing, it can be a ransomware, or it can be a DDoS, or any sort of. When I just look at for our email security system, so how the emails are coming and what percentage of the phishing emails. Almost 30% of the emails are phishing. Actually our email security system is doing a good job, and it is not at all delivering those emails, 30% emails. So I will say the frequency of cyber attack is one of the major challenges we are facing.
Thanks, Isaac. Sunil, how about you sharing that what is that one challenge? We heard 3 challenges on resources, awareness, attacks. What is that one challenge which comes out in your mind, which is, again, keeps you disturbed and stressed?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sunil here. I'm the head director of IT at Al Falah University. We are an Emirati university. And, having said that, I've been heading this team for nearly 7 years now. And let me tell you, I have wide experience with many industry portfolios, like even I've been working with construction, I have worked with ISPs, internet service providers, and many others as such. And from the experience that I gained from working in an internet service providers, what I've found in education, I will not say this is specific to my university, but it is like I would have to tell you that I have many colleagues who are there in universities. So what I have found, the major threat is that of an email spoofing, or you can say the other word would be like, just 1 minute. Yeah, phishing attacks. So now these 2 things I have noticed widely has grown during this pandemic period. People or the cyber attacks happen just for a monetary sake as such. We have deployed a system which mitigates these issues, and of course, it's a learning process for all. Cybersecurity is an important aspect as well. If gone unnoticed, things can go very bad against the universities or the educational institutes, because they hold a lot of data from ranging from students' information to faculty's information. Everyone is there under one umbrella as such. So one mistake can make a lot of change. What I found is emails are the major targets, and you need to protect your email communications more. Thank you.
Thanks, Sunil. I think we saw that Isaac also mentioned that the attacks have grown, and then you have gone into the direction that specific from that the phishing and email attack has zoomed up, which we see that all the industry reports are telling that they have not gone linear, they have gone exponential growth has happened, phishing attack and others. So I think that is there. I can see from audience, one of the things which is somebody from the audience is bringing out is the budget, that we are facing all these challenges. What we saw that Zuena had mentioned that IT resources. So resources boils down to budget, because we have budget constraints. So we don't get resources, we don't get support from that perspective. Now, if I have to go a little deeper now, again to all of you, that how do you think that, given these attacks have grown, which Sunil and Isaac mentioned, how are we doing on the technology side? From the technology, are we prepared, or the gap is there, or the gap has grown with the COVID-19, our technology preparedness for the cyber attacks? Zuena, how do you see the technology gap in cybersecurity preparedness of the organizations? What is your experience, Zuena?
There are actually three typical problems that I have noticed. First and foremost, cybersecurity, usually it is considered as a problem that the IT department solely has to deal with. It is delegated to them. And while I do agree that, yes, it is a technical issue and there are many technical aspects associated with it, but when it comes to defending an institution, it requires a sense of the value that is at risk. Because especially if we talk about the schools or if we talk about universities, there is a lot of research over there. There's a lot of intellectual property that is at risk. So we need to see the actually understand the sense of the value that is at risk. Then we need to derive the business priorities. We need to look at the model. We need to make sure that what is the institution's risk culture, to what extent can we risk things, and what are there defined roles or not, what are the risks, are people aware of their responsibilities? Because in my opinion, the IT department alone cannot handle the cybersecurity on its own. There are a lot of factors that are at play here. And then there are a lot of myths that people believe that, okay, when it comes to cybersecurity, the more money that we are going to spend, it's like adding more hackers to our ranks. It's going to protect us. But we need to understand that the cyber attacks are evolving, and we need to equip ourselves with it. There are compliance issues that no one is addressing. There are no cybersecurity protocols in place in most of the institutions there. And even if there are checklists that are prepared, but they are more about the formal compliance rather than addressing the real resilience that needs to be built. So I feel that these are the things that need to be addressed before we can, and that once we address these issues at this level, we will be then able to, address cyber risk in the context of protecting ourselves truly. We'll be able to mitigate cyber risk at different levels, whether it comes to the data infrastructure, whether it comes to applications. We need to understand the organizational requirements first, because we cannot over invest with our usually we can say the limited budgets or the financial constraints that we deal with. We cannot over invest into technical gadgets. We cannot and we cannot under invest at the same time into complexity reduction. We need to make sure that the cyber risk, it is mitigated at several levels, and that adaptation is the key. Adoption is the key. Yeah.
So I get you, Zuena. So what I hear from you is that generally security is treated as it is IT responsibility, whereas security is everybody's responsibility.
Absolutely.
I mean, everyone is a stakeholder, whether it is the leader of the organization to the foot soldiers. Everybody is responsible. Everybody has a role to play in it in some form and fashion. One should take a cyber risk assessment and see that within the constraints of what you're living in, how do you put your budgets and your dollars in different budgets, seeing the cyber risk, intellectual property, what needs to be protected, and drive out the program. So thanks for that, Zuena. Alvina, from your perspective, how should we, approach and, invest on technology or resource preparedness to mitigate this particular, challenge, cybersecurity challenge?
First thing, what I feel is finding the correct people, correct company for your security. Because as we can see, the things are changing. Big companies are there, but are they ready to, to secure the systems or the requirement of the company that you're looking for? You can get the resources. Multiple companies, when this pandemic situation have, started, new multiple online resources, new things, they came up and they started giving a free, especially the resources for the kids. Just download this, and the schools and everybody started approaching them. How we were filtering them, those resources, if we are getting in a less penny cost or like a free of cost, how secure they were for installing in our system, first thing. And then for our school systems, when we were going to get the security, cybersecurity, how secure those companies were. When you're sending or getting the school management system, how secure their own system is. So these are the major things what I feel like when we are going for any, to get any resource. Sometimes the company owners, they just say, okay, khalas, go and buy those resources, whatever you need, because they are not aware about it. As I always say, that awareness is the most important thing. You can go and get it, but are you giving your, getting the right security that you need it? This is the most important part. So, because I personally faced this during the pandemic issue, after a month, I faced this issue. I was leading the things and my own ID hacked, and big disaster happened. And at that time, it was like, luckily, just after a month of this pandemic issue. So we understood, okay, we need a cybersecurity, a good system, and we got it. Because see, the biggest challenge is right now, especially in the education sector, when we are talking about K-12 schools, the management or the people are not understanding that in education sector as well, your data is the most important thing right now. Every single value, future is all about data. All the students' information, this is the future. First thing, the major information. Second, students' academic, the response. So the universities in the future, they will be able to understand that how many students we are going to get. Parents' information is there. Your Emirates ID is there. Your passport is there. So your data is the most important thing. And education sector, we are taking care of our medical fields, every field, but people were ignoring the education sector. But thanks to pandemic, I always say in every session, wherever I go, I say thanks to the pandemic situation, especially for the education people like me who are always after like IT or innovation, people are forced to go for it. Like we saw a drastic change. So for me, who was trying our best to go for these systems, now everybody is on that. And now this situation made us, understand that the cybersecurity is really important, and we need to have, the best companies and the right company to work on.
Thank you, Alvina. I think you got given a good perspective of different dimensions. One is, there are applications, they were being offered free by organizations. Now, we don't know what kind of, when they are offering these free applications, they may be asking for data which will be maybe PII. And if that PII data goes to those organizations, do they have the security controls in place to protect the data? There's no due diligence or security assessment done of those vendors, and they were offering those resources which may be tempting to go for, but they may have their side effect of security. And we know that the kind of data we are handling about students, parents, and all, it is all PII. It needs to be protected. If it comes in the market that this school's this data is here, or this educational institute's this data is here, it will be a brand. And all the parents, the first thing they look at the school, they look at it not from like the banks is treated more from the financial perspective. The educational institution, the first fear is brand protection. And from that brand, any data going out, which is personal to the parents, if it has gone out, they see the brand of the organization, the educational institute impacted. So brand protection is a big driver, and that data protection is a big driver. So Alvina, totally with you. Let me call Isaac now to share his perspective on this subject.
To fight cybersecurity threats effectively, we need to build a strong cyber program. Many organizations, educational institutes, doesn't have a full-time employee who is dedicated for cybersecurity. Many education institute doesn't have an up-to-date IT infrastructure to protect against the threats. Main reason is the financial constraints. There is no budget to spend for cybersecurity. This is happening in the back end. This is nothing in the front end. Even the people will think about, oh, what the students are getting, and what, they're not thinking about, oh, the back end, this should be strong, this should be ready. Otherwise, we have to pay a lot. The resource challenge also comes with the knowledge and experience gap. Some of, that also comes into the picture. So for my point of view, the financial constraints and resource challenge, these are the two things we need to focus to fight cybersecurity threats effectively.
Thanks. Thanks. I think whether it is Zubena, Alvina, or Sunil, I think they all have the similar problems, what you have said. But we'll still like to hear from Sunil. Sunil, what is your view? Isaac brought out a good perspective about the resource and financial constraints which we face in, keeping the cybersecurity posture strong. What is your take on this subject, Sunil?
Thank you once again for this question. I would like to refer to my previous panelist, Mr. Ed, who commented on this particular aspect. What I'm going to like to say is, all education institute has to look at the what kind of data they are protecting, what kind of infrastructure they have, and then decide upon what solution they need. This will also help us understand what would be the ongoing cost, what is the upcoming cost that would be coming up in future. Now, see, there are n number of solutions. With the ransomware introduced, I can see that EDR, XDR are in demand. You have ATP, you have identity and access management system, and then on top of this, if your systems or if your servers or LMS system or any kind of ticketing system or something, all these things are hosted in premise, then you definitely need a firewall. Of course, firewall alone will not save you. You will have to have endpoint protection as well. So there are n number of products. Based on those requirements, you have to invest accordingly. The challenge here, I would like to say, is that yes, budgetary constraints are there because pandemic has affected everyone, every sector, in fact. And in order to, in order to fight those things, you have to look at your actual requirement and then invest into this. For us, we have already invested a lot of security things, and we are quite well with that. But there are challenges. Yes, you will have to address it one by one as we proceed. Thank you.
Thanks, Sunil. I think you brought out one perspective on undertaking a cyber risk assessment, and that's the key starting point. That is something which is a challenge in terms of to define that risk itself is a big challenge, but that is something which is the mandatory field. Since we are now on time for the closure, if I have to summarize what Sunil, you have said, Isaac, Zuena, Alvina, all of you have said for both the aspects, the challenges and the approach, what I can see is from the challenges perspective, all of you have agreed that there is a constraint on getting good resources. That is human resources. The second part is financial constraint, the management support to give the dollars and all. Because for the attacker, whether it is a banking sector or the education sector, the attack is same. It's not the attack, a phishing attack is there for the banking sector or the military sector or the government sector or the education sector. Attack is same. Ransomware attack is same. So if the attack is same, it's not like you are using a small gun and a big gun for firing financial, you are using a big gun, and for education, you are using a small gun. It is not the case. The same gun, which is the phishing gun or the ransomware gun or the DDoS gun, the same gun is being used for that sector and for education sector. If that being the case, we have financial budget constraints, we have people awareness. We saw that, as Alvina said, that COVID was a blessing in disguise, that has actually led to people awareness in education sector that wake up. People didn't even know password, parents didn't even know passwords, and now suddenly all the fathers and mothers know the passwords because they have to see that their child is in front of the laptops and iPads and doing remote learning. Now all parents are educated. Now all parents have known about the password and security requirements, and to see that these digital devices, how to use them for learning. So suddenly the learning curve for them have gone up. With that exposure, they have also got exposed to these attacks. And somewhere, as a moral responsibility of us as being an education sector, we have to educate the parents and students also. Apart from protecting the organization, we also face the challenge that the parents say, you never told us the passwords have expired or passwords not to be shared. I mean, we also face parents saying, who told us that we are not supposed to share password with other students? So you have to educate the parents also. So the dynamics of the challenge, internal and external, have multifolded. And education sector, which had low support from staff, admin, teachers, and management, we have realized that all of them are helping us, all of them are contributing up to us, and they are part of this basket of problem, and they have joined hands to mitigate the cyber security risk and ensure that the organization is protected. I would like to once again thank all of you, all the panelists, for sharing your insights and helping all the audience to learn from your experiences about the challenges and problems and solutions which we have spoken about. Once again, thank you, all of you. Over to you, Karan.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you so much.
We have one question. It's on the best advice for someone starting in the cybersecurity industry.
If somebody is entering the cybersecurity industry, there are different buckets he can enter. He can enter, as a security professional. He can enter as a security vendor. Now, because all of us are security professionals, so I will give the perspective of if he wants to make security professional as his career. From that perspective, somewhere down the line, he has to get his exposure to the IT facets, the IT, basic foundation of IT, to understand what is the different type aspects of IT, which encompasses applications, infrastructure, information security, so that he understands the landscape of IT. And when he is going to any industry, that is the healthcare industry or education industry or financial industry and telecom industry, he should have a knack to understand the business, that how is this business coupled with this IT. Once he understands the business and he understands the IT, then he can put a layer of security around it. So to be a security professional, you have to have a good understanding of the business, good understanding of the digital component below it, and then give a layer of security. And then there are, for that journey, understanding IT, then understanding security, and that's how the roadmap he has to build 3 months, 6 months, 1 year with certifications, so that it is a very focused approach. That's my take. I would like to invite panelists if anybody wants to share any other perspective.
Thank you, Vivek. Karan, can I take 5 more minutes just to, I will just wrap up quickly, but then I will address this question as well. For the cyber security, it's an important aspect today. And having said that, it is not very easy topic as well. So for starting up a cyber security initiative, you need to be very well experienced. You should know what are the tactics involved and how to protect your environment. All this comes with an experience as such. So experience is the key to the startup ventures. If somebody has to start, you have to be, on your toes on this. The other thing that I wanted to discuss was that how to mitigate, what do you say? I just wanted to highlight that to stop majority of cyber threats, all we need to do is try and educate your users, that is the end users or the faculties. Now, see, faculties are generally good at their teaching subjects. They never had an option of going online till the pandemic came. After the pandemic, a lot of things changed from their aspect as well. So what we actually try to do is that we train all the faculty as to what to do, what not to do, what kind of emails are spoofed, what kind of emails are like a phishing attack. So how to respond to those things, it adds up to secure your network more. Without proper training, nothing can happen. And I think one of the team lady, I guess, Hania, has already highlighted this point, and I like that point very well, and that's the reason why I just wanted to include this in this closing statement. Thank you all. Hello,
Karan, over to you, Karan.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. With that, we come to the end of the session. Thank you, Sunil. Thank you, Isaac, Alvina, Vivek, and Zuena for your time and for participating. And also thank you for all the participants to the attendees. So with this, we come to the end of the session. On October 18th, we are actually organizing a roundtable discussion, a physical roundtable discussion for the first time after the pandemic. So it's going to be held in Novotel Dubai World Trade Center. I will reach out to you and share the information for that as well. And also in February next year, in 2022, we are going to be organizing the physical edition for the Cyber Warriors Conclave education session. So I will keep everyone posted with all the details. Thank you, everyone, once again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good day.